On today's episode, we'll explore all things mighty and heroic with a deep dive into the good guys. Today, we're going to be taking a peek inside the palace and looking at the royal family and the royal court and the guards and the main characters that were sort of central and pivotal to every episode of the cartoons. We're not going to go into all of the heroic warriors, that will be for another time, but we want to go over the essential good guy characters. So we've got King Randor and Queen Marlena, who were the king and queen of Eternia. And King Randor came from a long lineage of kings and heroes and potentially He-Mans. So in some of the later lore, it kind of fleshed out that He-Man was sort of like a genetic trait, he was a descendant of the He-Mans. But then in some even other later lore, they kind of race swapped him, an ancestor. And so that made it a little bit confusing as well. Also, the fact that King Randor never actually became He-Man, but his son did. So I don't know if it skips a generation. Definitely some plot holes in the larger story, but still very cool. The point is, he was a mighty, just, and fair king of the land. And his wife, Marlena, was the beautiful queen. Now, she was very cool because she was actually from Earth, and she had crash landed. She was an astronaut, and she was flying in space, and she crash landed on the planet of Eternia and met the king, and they fell in love, and they ruled together side by side. I thought it was very cool that the stories from the 80s had these very, very powerful female characters: Teela, the sorceress, the green goddess, the Queen Marlena. So, in a franchise called He Man, you'd think it was just going to be nothing but men, but there's actually lots of very strong women involved in the storytelling. So now we've got Man at Arms, and Man at Arms was from the original line, and they just evolved his character. He was like the smartest man in the land, and he built all the vehicles and the spaceships and things that everyone would fly around. His sort of like high tech helmet sort of like was a giveaway that maybe he was going to be kind of a techie. So he was like the Boeing executive for Eternia and built all sorts of spaceships and rockets. And they even gave him a name. His name was Duncan. He wasn't just Man at Arms anymore. He was Duncan. And the original doll was clean shaven. And then in the cartoon, they gave him a mustache. And in some other incarnations, he's got the stash. So the fans debate stash or no stash for Duncan, Man at Arms. Then they had our girl Teela. So Teela really got this upgrade. She is the captain of the guard. So she is in charge of all the soldiers and all the guards. And also, they developed her character even more to be Duncan's adopted daughter. So not his biological daughter, but his adopted daughter. And her actual biological parent is none other than the sorceress. So they took some of that original old lore about the green goddess and Teela maybe being the same person or being clones of each other and all that sort of bizarre comic narrative. And they made it a little bit more linear, where she was the biological mother of Teela, but she couldn't raise her because she was busy guarding Castle Grayskull. So she had Duncan raise Teela for her in the palace with Adam, and they grew up together. And so that's why they were like childhood sweethearts, essentially. And also, it was a secret. It was also lots of secrets. So this was also yet another secret, that Teela didn't know who her mother was. And they had to keep it a secret from her, sort of hinting at that maybe someday when the secret would get revealed, it would be because it would be time for Teela to become the next sorceress. So again, so many stories about Teela, even though He-Man's the main star, Teela almost had second billing, but barely. All right, so then we've got Orko. So Orko was the court magician, and he cast spells and entertained people, and he was just kind of silly. Often his spells didn't really work, and he was really the avatar for little kids. So if you were a little 8-year-old and you saw Orko, you were like, that's my guy. Some of the more adult fans, like maybe they don't like Orko because he's too silly, but he's fun. And then, of course, we've got Adam, the prince, the handsome, noble prince, but he actually wasn't always like very prince-like, because sometimes he would be sort of a doofus. And I mean, it was sort of the Clark Kent sort of idea that he had to be kind of silly and goofy and maybe even a little irresponsible to kind of hide the fact that he actually was He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe and the most disciplined and the most serious and all of those things. So Adam would also be sort of like the comic counterpoint to He-Man's sternness. And then we have Cringer, the family pet, who is sort of like a scaredy cat, sort of cowardly lion motif. And so that's always sort of played for laughs whenever you've got like a big cat like this that's scaredy, afraid. But of course, he would turn into Battle Cat whenever Adam needed to turn into He-Man. I don't think that Cringer's cringiness and Cringer's cowardice was a ruse. So unlike Adam, who would sort of like play up his goofiness to hide the fact that he was actually He-Man, the most powerful man in the universe, I do think that Cringer was authentically terrified and sometimes didn't even want to go into battle or turn into Battle Cat. So sort of some complex identity issues there for our friend Cringer. And so that brings us to the Sorceress, the beautiful and heroic guardian of Castle Grayskull and the harborer of many secrets. She was secretly Zoar the Falcon. People didn't know that, except I think He-Man and Orko and probably Man-at-Arms, because she also harbored that secret. She knew about He-Man and other people didn't know. And she harbored her own secret of being Teela's mother. And there's one last secret that she knew about. She knew that when Adam was a young lad, actually younger than this, just a baby, he had a twin sister. There was Adam and Adora. It was very Luke and Leia. But Princess Adora had been kidnapped from the royal family when she was just a baby, taken away by a vile creature called Hordak. And Hordak was sort of a Lovecraftian sort of eldritch god of horror. And he came around later in the lore, and the big reveal was he had stolen the Princess Adora from their cribs when they were just babies, and the sorceress knew about it, and so did Man-at-Arms. But she cast a spell to make sure everyone would forget, because it was such a dreadful moment of their lives. And so while Adam and He-Man were defending Eternia for many years, nobody knew that Hordak actually had Adora with him the whole time. And fans of the series know that Adora grew up to be She-Ra. So as we wait for the new movie coming out this summer, only time will tell. Will there be She-Ra? Will there be Hordak? How deep is the lore going to go? I can't wait. So stay tuned next time, where we're going to explore the inhabitants of the dreadful Snake Mountain.
Subscribe.